YouTube, welcome back to my channel and welcome to A Closer Book. First book I'm going to talk about today is Human Acts by Kang. This book chronicles the uprising that happened in Gwangju, South Korea in 1980. There was a coup and the civilians were protesting the new government. The government responded by declaring martial law and attacking the civilians. A lot of university students died. And even now, 30 something years later, there still hasn't been an official report on just how many people were killed. Rumor has it that it's up to 600 people who died. This book follows the event but focuses on one of the children who died in the attacks and just the impact that the death had on the people who were working with him, the family members, the other people who saw and witnessed the event, and just how they dealt with it afterwards. The book takes place in 7 parts, each one narrated by a different person and also set in a different time. So the first story, the first part, is narrated by one of the boys who is killed. The second part is narrated by one of his friends. And as the book continues, other people who met the boy, who worked with him, a volunteer, family members, the person who is now trying to write the story but dealing with censorship because the government doesn't want to release the story. Very, very interesting look at an event and looking at it from so many varied perspectives kind of gives you a complete picture. So in the first part, we learn more like the circumstances of the story. And as we are meeting these other people in these subsequent parts, they're giving clues as to what happened just from their own memories. And you're wondering, how much of this person's memory is tainted by the experiences that they've had so many years later. Like the event happened in 1980, but one of the persons who was captured and tortured after the uprising, he doesn't tell his part until 1990. So years after the torture that he has endured and years after having conversations with other prisoners, other former prisoners, kind of going through the experience, reliving it every time, that's when his story comes into play. And you're wondering, how much of his story is affected by just the things that he has been dealing with these past 10 years. There's so many quotes in this book. You can tell I put a lot of post-its. This is a library book, by the way, but I fully intend to buy my own copy because I need to transcribe these notes somewhere. They need to go somewhere. And this book offers such a stunning look at a tragic event, the way people process this tragic event, and the way maybe good can come out of something like this. The title is Human Acts, and it focuses on an event that is so inhumane, a government that is charged and has accepted a mantle to protect its people and then turning on them. Then we have the human acts that are between the people, the civilians themselves. So then we get to the cover. So the picture is of this rib cage, an exposed rib cage that no longer has the skin and muscle to protect it. So it's an exposed rib cage, but then there's a bird sitting on top of it as though the bird is sitting on a cage that it has been freed from. So as though the rib cage is a bird cage, rib, bird. Phonetically, some of the same letters, and then there are these yellowish orange flowers. All of this imagery gets explained during the story. Fantastic book. I first read it as an e-version on my Kindle, and I couldn't understand everything that was going on, but then I went back and got the hardcover. You can tell I put a lot of notes, I put a lot of work into understanding the culture behind this book and the real story behind the historical fiction story. And second time around, I gave it complete 5 stars, so I really recommend this. This was the only book that I rated 5 stars in February, so you can tell that I really enjoyed this, and I would love if you have read it or if you're thinking about reading it, leave me a comment down below so we can chat about that one. The next book is Best Laid Plans and Other Disasters by Amy Rivers. This is book 2 in a trilogy, which follows 2 cousins, Gwen, who has political ambitions, and her cousin Val, who's a PR consultant. And in the first book, they launch a campaign to get Gwen elected as the mayor of their town. And in the second book, She's now the mayor, and she's dealing with some of the issues that crop up on her job. She's a young woman in this male-dominated field, and people, men and women alike, do not respond to her in the way that she would like. So they focus on her youth, they focus on her gender, they focus on the fact that her relationships with other people they think might affect her ability to do the job. And so she's dealing with all of this prejudice. I really enjoyed this book, probably even more so because I needed a book like this. After coming back from my trip to Korea with Kang, I needed something that was going to be light and fun and fast-paced and easy, and this book was perfect for the job. It is not high-flown literary fiction by any means. Yes, the author deals with things like sexual harassment, both from men and women. It's very interesting the way the author juxtaposed two characters, one male, one female, both dealing with sexual harassment in their job, and the way that they resolve those issues in such different ways, but still effectively. I really thought that that was great. And so even though this was a light, fast-paced, easy, fun book, there were still lots of literary themes, lots of literary devices that the author used. And so I gave it 3.5 stars. And the book is, like I said, the second part in a trilogy, I think. And so I'm really looking forward to book 3 to see which characters the author is going to focus on next. It is another short book. It's only 220 something pages, I think. I like the color of the cover. I kind of like the design, but I don't like this picture. I don't feel like this picture represented the picture that I have of any of the characters while I'm reading the story. So I didn't particularly connect with that, but otherwise, I like the way the author included bookmarks, and she sent me this handwritten note. I really like when I get books from authors and they are personalized. So when I send out my own books to readers, I try to do the same thing. I really enjoy talking and sharing my book with people. So that's something that I enjoy when other people do it too. Radiance of Tomorrow by Ishmael Beah takes place in Sierra Leone. The author is from Sierra Leone, and he previously wrote his memoir, which is A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier, because he was involved in the civil war that happened in Sierra Leone. This novel is historical fiction. It follows some of the survivors of that civil war and their experience after they have lived through the most horrific thing they can imagine ever happening to them, being forced from their homes, being forced from their way of life, enduring that, maybe being a refugee someplace, being imprisoned someplace, but now finally returning home. What is the home that they're returning to? What kind of life can they expect now that they are back in their village, now that they are back to reestablish relationships? What kind of lifestyle, what kind of life will they have? The people who have been charged with coming to protect them, what impact will they have on their society, on their culture, on their way of life, on their desire to kind of return to the way of life that they knew before? The first post-it that I put in this book was on page 27, I think, and it was a reflection that one of the characters was giving about hiding, losing his wife and hiding his children in the wilderness, waiting for this war to be over. After peace was supposed to have been restored, you know, he's growing impatient now. He wants to bring his children back to school. He wants to return to his way of life. And so they finally come out of hiding, and then they're captured by rebels or whatever. And unfortunately, these rebels, in their attack, they amputate this man's hand as well as the hands of his children. And the desire to live, the desire to still survive even after all of that, propels him to, with his one hand, bandage up the children and walking long distances with them to try to get them to a hospital. And when they get to the main road, they collapse on the street, and this other person, this taxi driver who is on his way to go make a living, takes his passengers out of his car and brings this family, this man and his 2 children, to the hospital because he is so overcome with compassion and admiration for the strong will to survive that he sees displayed by this man and his children. And I closed the book and I took a moment and I just cried about the atrocities that we render on each other for, I don't know what, like what would make a person say this man and his two children, innocent children, what would make a person say, cut their hands off? Like, why would you do that? But then, contrasting that with this man trying to still take care of his children, contrast that with this Good Samaritan seeing them and putting himself out to help them, paying for his hospital bills and so on. What I didn't like about the book is written in third person narrative, and it's following lots of different characters in the village, in the town. So we get to see a lot of things happen, but we also kind of lose a little bit of the backstory, a little bit of the motivation. The author tried to compensate for that by telling you the person's motivation, but that kind of writing style I don't feel is very authentic, because I don't feel like when you can see two people that you can also see what they're thinking. Later in the book, the author shares how mining and commerce come to this rural village, but we get to see the impact firsthand, the impact that this infrastructure has on this primitive community. We get to see them robbing and stealing from each other. Oh my goodness, this was such an emotional read. I don't know what you think about when you think about African culture and about people who are refugees or people who have endured civil wars in their countries. I don't know whether we are correct in thinking that we should always go in to help these people, because it feels like we think we know them better than they know themselves. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not making a judgment on all the people who have gone to work in these countries. For sure, I have friends who have gone as missionaries to countries in Africa and in Central America and so on. But seeing the impact that these new industries, this new industrial way of life has on these people, the corruption that it kind of promotes within the African community itself, the government officials and the chief and so on, sometimes they are bribed into doing things that are not necessarily in the best interest of the community, but that will help them to progress on their own. So I'm not sure what my opinion is on the reality, but the book was great. The book was a great read. I rated it 3 stars because I did have some challenges with the literary devices that the writer used to convey his message, but I really like the message. I like the story, and I would like to read his memoir, A Long Way Gone. It was published in 2007, so at some point I think I'll pick it up. So thanks for watching A Closer Book. Let me know in the comments if you've read Ishmael Beah's other book, his memoir. If you read Han Kang's other book, The Vegetarian. She won the Man Booker International Prize for it last year. Or if you have read any of Amy Rivers' books. Or if you want to talk about something else, leave me a comment so we can chat about whatever you like. This is a booktube channel, and I just love talking about books. So subscribe if you're not already, and we'll chat later. Until then, happy reading!